Last thing that I wanted to touch on. Pause. Recent uprising of First Take, and there's a reason why it's rising. JJ Redick is on.
Oh, yeah. This is great.
I think this now JJ Redick has been on there. They've brought in Mad Dog. I think the Mad Dog move was like a horrible move for ESPN, to be quite honest with you. Draymond Green is also doing post-game interviews. So the question is, and I don't even think it's really a question. I think we all really like it. We can just comment on it. How do we feel about players getting more involved into sports media?
I like it, I like it a lot. I'm glad it's making all those xenophobic and TV like Russo mad about, and I'm glad they're going on TV and getting exposed for their true motives and how they feel deep down. It's sad to say, but I don't think JJ Redick is going to last too much longer on First Take because Stephen A. would rather have someone like Russo on the show so he can be the smartest guy in the room, so he can be the smartest guy on the screen. Anybody that can out black Stephen A., anybody that can out take Stephen A., anybody that can out culture Stephen A., they typically don't last long on Stephen A.'s show. Stephen A. has already shown that he's with the Shohei Ohtani comments, he's a xenophobic, and he's at this point washed. Stephen A. is past his prime. He's making a mockery of the analyst game. He's making it real hard for young upcoming analysts like myself. When we get our foot in the door, we got to have guys like this Stephen A. guy who's just known for spewing these terrible takes half the time and being outdone. So I'm glad JJ's getting his opportunity. I hope JJ really builds off of this for his own platform for his podcast because his podcast is definitely insightful.
I'm glad JJ Redick got more exposure, but to be honest, I'd rather not see him on ESPN. Like I'd rather there be a push in independent content creators. Because one, it's the industry we're in, so in the grand scale, it does benefit us. But two, it's just nicer to see everyone have their own independent platforms where they don't have to hold back with what they have to say on things. I know for a fact when JJ Redick's on ESPN, just something as simple as like cussing, like he's looking back on that, and I know on his podcast he probably would have like cussed out Mad Dog Russo if it was that same situation.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Yeah, cook Russo. One thing I'll say about JJ that hasn't been said is I love the fact that JJ is essentially a basketball player that doesn't have the I'm a basketball player perspective, and it's kind of refreshing. What I mean by that is JJ essentially does often use his insight and knowledge that he's gained as a player, but he isn't 24/7, 365 overly relying on any ignorant stance that he has and then backing it up saying, well, I've played the game. JJ is shown to have very deep intellect of the game of basketball. And then you can also JJ will say what like a lot of the stat nerds and people will say, but then you can't even pull the card. So it's like, now what? Right. And like now he's a fucking genius. And while it's a small step for non-D28s to have basketball takes, it's definitely a step in the right direction. If anything, it's just refreshing that a guy like JJ Redick is just unanimously accepted because bro clearly knows what the fuck he's talking about. He's not right all the time. I'm not about to act like JJ Redick never had a bad take that isn't flawless or whatever, but yeah, he's definitely a nice person to see.
No. Let's go that far. I can't recall if someone has to show me it. I can't recall JJ's bad take.
I think he said someone was in top three. Who was it? So
he made his top three. He had a podcast with Kevin Durant, and he was like the top three was a combination of KD, Jokic, and Embiid.
Yeah, I think it was like.
Well, he said KD and Embiid were top three, and Embiid was like, so who's the top three, JJ? And he's like, because at that point it's either Jokic or Giannis he's leaving out. He chose Jokic in that instance. And a lot of people did give him backlash on that.
But that's not a bad take though. Like if it's a top three, it's not like
it's not like grr type shit. I know what you mean. It's not like it's not like a over the top ignorant. You don't know anything you're talking about. It's just
it's not ignorant.
And then on top of it, he gives like he can give reasons and they're logical and they actually make sense.
Exactly.
They're not.
He could debate it. I believe he could debate it if he had.
So he gave reasons.
And he uses both advanced analytics and he can use the typical eye test and basketball experience. That's the perfect blend I've seen from him that I like. when he talks about the game, when he talks about players and comparing players, he uses every metric. He's going to use advanced stats. He's going to use common stats. He's going to use eye tests. He's going to cover every basis on why he believes something. He's not just going to stick to one. He's not a guy that's just going to argue advanced stats. He's not a guy that's going to just argue the fact that he played the game. Kendrick Perkins gets on TV and starts yelling about shit that he personally feels or that they're paying him to feel, and it's literally from the aspect of, well, you remember me from 08. All right, cool. You're not telling me nothing crazy. You're not giving me no real percentages. You're not reading off a Jumbotron. You're just pulling the Shaq whenever he's talking to Charles Barkley. Well, I got one. I got one of these. You don't. I know.
Yeah.
All right, Perk.
You see this? All right, shut up then.
Yeah,
Shut up.
Like that shit get nasty at some point. It's just like, bro.
Facts.
I'm not saying they don't know anything, but when you have to rely on that in an argument, that's how I know you lost the argument. It's like,
I hate seeing those conversations with Chuck and when Shaq and Chuck are going back and forth, and then you see Shaq hit him with the Charles. We're talking about guys in the finals. Kenny can talk to me. You can't talk to me, Chuck. Like, all right, bro.
Yeah,
like,
it's like
Shaq.
put it this way for chat, because it's slowly dying. I've noticed that as well with JJ, and that's why I'm happy. But for those that like basketball players, always right. Put it this way: imagine if we tried to do it to y'all. Essentially, chat, you can't disagree with any of my YouTube videos, any of the podcast takes or whatever, because you don't have our sub count, gang. You stream and you ain't gonna get the views we get.
I be on that type of time.
So it's just that simple. You can't disagree with what we say.
On Spaces, hell yeah.
Yeah, if you have a take that disagrees with our take, sorry, gang, you ain't us. You ain't a YouTuber.
I only pull that viewpoint out
Yeah,
is
exactly.
when niggas is generally talking about shit they really don't know nothing about. Like not too long ago, niggas was talking. There was some space about when people like the stuff Lowe was hearing on his birthday or whatever, and somebody in the space was like, I mean, I'm not a YouTuber, but I'm just saying, like the negative comments and stuff, they're all just jokes. It's not really too much to be worried about. No one should really be too much worried about that type of shit or something along those lines. And I'm like, nigga, I'm nowhere near as big as Lowe, and I've experienced it on a minuscule level when it's fucking annoying. You don't even experience that. How are you going to sit here and say what someone can and can't be affected by when you literally don't know nothing about it? You don't know what it's like to just put a tweet out and motherfuckers genuinely just hate on you, but you're trying to tell people that do know about it. Nah, bro, it's not that big of a deal, bro. It's just jokes. It's just trolls. That's stupid. That's the only time I've used that card.
Yeah, obviously, no common YouTuber would ever do that bullshit. It was an example.
That's a fact.
Anybody that does it.
The only thing I say about JJ and them, I love it. I've been watching JJ's podcast for years now. At this point, it's been good. It's always been good. I applaud CJ for doing what he does. I applaud Draymond for doing what he does. I got to tap into Draymond. I applaud the knuckleheads because even though they're not talking about analytics and stuff like that, they're talking about a side of basketball that just a lot of people don't talk about. And they're talking from a very relatable standpoint. Hey, Jackie McMullen. Hey, Bill Simmons. Hey, Ryan Russillo. Kendrick Perkins, you can get off TV too.
Kevin O'Connor type shit.
Yeah, I can't stand them either. I love hearing the players' perspective on the game, and they do it well. They don't do it. They're not boring when they do it. It's not analytical, this, that, and the third. And even if there's a section of that's from it, hey, I like that. Shout out to Tim Legler. I like Tim Legler. Richard Jefferson. All those guys. I'm happy for it.